The number of overall people in Gaza has risen since the start of the war.
Right here, the number of people in Gaza since the beginning of the war has risen. We have been saying this.
So there's a birth rate of over 5,000 a month, puts us somewhere around the 60,000 mark of babies born in Gaza since the start of the war, which is
60,000 babies have been born since the beginning of the war. Literally, even if numbers were true, there's 20,000 more babies that have been born. And you're talking to me about 1948, there were 700,000. There's 6 million Palestinians between the river to the sea today. There's only 7 million Jews here. Shalom, friends, and welcome back to another episode here on the show. Today, we're going to be discussing the Gaza death toll. There's been an amazing video by some actual journalists known as Visegrad or Visegrad. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce them. They have been based here in Israel for most of this war. Visegrad 24. They've done some amazing actual journalism throughout this last year during the war, and they just uploaded a video with Major Andrew Fox debunking the Gaza death toll. I think some of the most important journalism on this topic at the moment, some of the most important journalism in the war, and not just because it skews pro-Israel, but because it's actually talking about the truth. People keep throwing around this 40,000 number. I want to get into this. Here's the thing. I've never been comfortable of taking another creator's content and reacting to the whole thing in full. I've never been comfortable with that. So what I'll say is go watch this full video. I'll do some analysis. I'll blab about because at the end of the day, that's my job and that's what I do. But make sure that you go support Visegrad and watch their full video. We'll skip around and we'll jump around to different parts that are really good in this video.
Andrew Fox, a former British officer and a disinformation expert, 3 tours of Afghanistan. You yourself have been to Gaza.
when the world's media sees Gaza, the Israelis are going to have a really, really challenging time explaining that, because it's really hard to walk people through that level of damage and destruction.
Do you think that the death toll is large enough for this to be classified in any way, shape or form as a...
I'm not seeing any tactics they use that certainly we in the British Army or the American Army. One of the things
let's get right into the intro. We'll skip around. I want to get into like the hard facts of this video first.
We've been working on for the last few months is the toll in Gaza. It's one of the most hotly debated aspects of the Israel-Hamas war. You have done a very, very in-depth report on all of these reports around the death toll. What are the main findings of this report?
It's been an interesting few months digging into these figures, where we've been living daily with thousands of dead civilians. I think it's very important to start by acknowledging that fact, that a number of innocents have died.
I think it's really important also that he starts off by saying that, because I think what happens even sometimes for us on the pro-Israel side, we tend to like wash away the fact that civilians have died. We will just, because there's so much misinformation on this topic, we get aggressively defensive of the state of Israel and the IDF. But it is true that many, many civilians have died. But when it comes to the case of genocide, well, he puts it perfectly in the video. I don't even need to get into it.
In Gaza. That is one of the features of war, though, unfortunately. When wars occur, women and children and innocents are usually the greatest victim.
It's true. War is not just. War is not equal. War is not fair. But also, when you aren't the one who starts the war, it's a little easier to understand why what's happening is happening. But you have to look at it objectively. You can't look at it as 1948 was the beginning of the war.
What we found looking into the Hamas fatality statistics from Gaza, however, is that there is enough data manipulation in there to raise real concerns. So things we found, we can give you examples of people who are listed as being killed by IDF action, who've gone into Israel to receive cancer treatment. We've found people that died in 2014 and 2022. We've also found a real trend of reducing the ages of people on those lists to drag them down from being 18-year-olds to being 17-year-olds and therefore children.
Now, all of us knew that this was happening as people who have had interaction with soldiers that are in Gaza. This summary of what he's giving us, we've all known. Everybody in Israel has known that there's not a genocide happening. I think for the outside world, because of all this biased media reporting against Israel, this crusade against Israel in a war that it didn't start, it's been very easy to sort of just like pick at Israel and be like, you're doing a genocide because we see kids on Instagram dying. It's like, hello, on October 7th, kids in Israel were being killed and nobody called for a genocide. Nobody said it was a genocide. Why do Jewish lives not matter compared to Palestinians? Actually, I'll even raise it. In the Congo, in Sudan, in Somalia, thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids are being killed. In Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen. But nobody calls it a genocide. Why is it only a genocide when Palestinians get killed? It isn't or it is? Are Palestinian lives somehow worth more than anybody else's on planet Earth?
And so our key finding is that when you're presented with breakdowns of men, women and children killed, these are almost certainly unreliable.
So how many civilians would you say have died in this war so far?
It's still a very significant number. And if we take the rough 42,000 that Hamas have listed, 34,000 plus of those are named, and they claim they have bodies for them. Obviously, we have no way to verify that. The IDF claim 17 to 20,000 Hamas militants have been killed in those numbers. And we found a degree of data that actually does support that men, particularly in the 15 to 50 age group, are indeed dying in much greater numbers than women and children. And
so look, I'm going to push back on what he said here and just say something maybe that will be deemed as a little bit controversial, but I want you guys to listen to me, okay? I've seen estimates on the IDF ends as high from as high as 20 to 25,000 combatants killed. If we take the highest number, which is floating around the 40 to 42,000 right now, and half of those are combatants, then that means 20,000 could potentially be women and children. But we know that the numbers of women and children have been extremely skewed. We know that Hamas has fired rockets at their own people, which has caused hundreds of deaths probably. We know that many of these people have died from natural causes. He even gets into the exact number in this video, which is a few thousand. We'll get into it a little bit later. All of that being said, when you say it's still a large number of mass casualties or it's still a large number of civilians killed, if the number, let's say floats around 15,000, is it still a lot of civilians killed? Now, I'm not saying it in the perspective of every civilian killed is a civilian killed too much. But if we look at it in the scale of what's been going on in the Middle East, just to the north of us, in Lebanon, with 300,000 killed. In Syria, just to the north of us, 500,000 killed. In Ethiopia, just to the south of us, another 500,000 killed. In Yemen, 300,000 killed. In Somalia, 500,000 killed. In Sudan, 50,000 killed just since the beginning of 2024. Is 15,000 Gazans or 20,000 Gazans who are even questionable on that, okay, we're even questionable on that number. Is that a mass amount of people? I would go to say that if we're just looking at it numbers-wise, it isn't. And actually, like John Spencer has stated, who is a bona fide expert on this topic, and he's multiple times said that the casualty rate, civilian casualty rate in the Gaza Strip has been historical on how much Israel has preserved life. And it has been clearly abundant to everybody who knows even one single soldier in Gaza that is the case. And I know multiple soldiers who have been in Gaza. That I know for a fact that there is no genocide being committed. And I know for a fact that they aren't just mowing down Palestinians all willy-nilly. That I know for a fact that that's not what's going on because I have people on the inside who are able to report that to me. Now, I know it's hard to detach the emotions from a woman and a child who are being killed by a bomb. But when we talk about a war that was subjugated onto Israel non-consensually, it's not the two parties decided we're going to war. It was a surprise attack that was an actual genocide against Jewish people. Was an actual genocide, an act of trying to erase Jewish people, a Holocaust-like event, versus us defending ourselves. And don't forget the hundreds of hostages that are underground in Gaza that we've been trying to retrieve. I think when you put all of that into play, it's kind of harder to sit there and say there's still many, many civilians that have been killed. I don't know. I think maybe people will find that controversial to be said. That's just my personal feelings. When we go to represent people, if we're going to say that many civilians have been killed, we need to put a marker on all the civilians that are being killed around the world. We can't just report on Israel and be like, many civilians have been killed. It's like, okay, many civilians have been killed, but there's many more civilians being killed every single place on planet Earth at the moment than in Gaza.
People who are in the elderly or in the infant bracket. My estimate of civilians killed at the moment is still sitting around potentially the 20,000 mark. So plus or minus 5,000.
Do you think that
I think it's probably even skewing lower than 20,000 in my opinion, just seeing what I'm seeing on the ground. And also, I really think there's a lot to be said when it comes to who is an innocent civilian. All right, let's just put it like this. If you're a family of four, let's say a mother, and a Hamas member comes into your house and eats maklube and drinks water at your house, right, to gear up before going out to kill more Jews or to do more terrorist attacks, are you still an innocent civilian? Is your family still innocent? I mean, in the scape of war, if you're endangering the lives of your children, and we have to make a decision as an army to take action against you. We have to take action against these soldiers or these terrorists that are coming to kill our people. If you allow a soldier into your house to eat food and water, which we know has been happening, that innocent civilian Gazans have been allowing Hamas members into their home to eat food and replenishing them. Does that still make you an innocent person? Just because you're a woman? Are you still innocent? I don't know. I think that's a questionable moral. You have to make a decision at a certain point. You have to say, hey, listen, if this person is fueling the terrorist, are they also a terrorist? Yeah, I don't have a hard answer for you on that, but it's definitely not a clear-cut yes or no.
Is not proportional. What is proportionality as defined in military law?
You can't look at the conflict in its entirety and look at the effects of the conflict to make any assessment of proportionality whatsoever. The important thing to note about proportionality is that it has to be assessed on a strike-by-strike, action-by-action basis.
True.
And the simple question is this: is the target struck worth the number of civilian or other collateral damage inflicted by that airstrike? So, for example, had they used an airstrike on Sinwar, they could have justified a large amount of munitions. And that's what they were able to do with Mohammed Daif, who was Sinwar's number 2. He was killed in a huge airstrike with a number of 2,000-pound bombs and a bunker-busting bomb used. And there was significant collateral damage in that.
And now the funny thing is, to the pro-Palestine side or to the Arabs and Muslims around the world, every single death, every collateral damage to kill a target like this is too much for them. Because you can only kill people if they're an infidel. You can only kill people if they're against Islam. But if you have actual Islamic terrorists who are hiding under civilians and trying to murder civilians, and you have to unfortunately kill 40 civilians to get to that one target to stop the perpetuation of this hate and this terrorism, to them it's always going to be too much. So if you're listening to sources like Al Jazeera, and then you have sources like CNN and Washington Post and New York Times who are parroting Al Jazeera and getting their sources from Gazans and from Hamas, then it's always going to seem like this is injustice. It's always going to seem like it's bad. But you have to look at these things pragmatically. You can't look at them solely in this is a death and it's horrible. That's the reason why these calculations are set up. It's a horrible thing. War is horrible. But at the end of the day, don't start a war you can't win. And especially don't hide under civilians as you start that war.
Airstrike. But it was Hamas's number 2. You could justify a huge amount of damage to take out a target of that exceptional military value. If that had been a lone Hamas gunman, you couldn't have justified that whatsoever.
Right.
And so proportionality, you can't look at the entirety of the...
And I'm not going to say that IDF has operated perfectly in that matter. There's definitely mistakes that have been made. But one thing I appreciate about the IDF, many times when mistakes are made, they openly say it. They openly admit to it. I'm not going to say that they have all the time. They're not a perfect army. We aren't perfect people. The Jews aren't suddenly the beacon of perfection in the Middle East, and it's super racist that we are held to that point all the time. But you can see that there's a clear attempt to make a differentiation between a high-value target and a low-value target.
Conflict, you have to look at each individual airstrike and say, was that justified against the amount of damage it caused?
In terms of the reports, what are the main sources that you analyze?
This is the most interesting part of the video, in my opinion.
This report on the Gaza death toll. What are the sources aside from the Gaza Ministry of Health?
So there are 2 main sources of casualty figures from Gaza. There's the Gaza Ministry of Health and there's the government media office in Gaza. And we've tried to focus on their documentation because actually there's a load of reports and there's loads of people who've looked at these figures and they've produced statistical analyses. Some have said that they think the death toll will be up to 186,000. Some have said it's far lower than that. Actually, that's no real use because they're secondary source. So we've always tried to stick to the primary source where we can.
Which is Hamas, by the way.
The other main source we've used is the social media of Hamas and Gazans themselves. And through that, we found people who are openly accepted to have been beaten to death by Hamas during the conflict. They're included on the list as having been killed by the RDF.
Fantastic.
And we found some really interesting stuff pushed out by Hamas on Facebook in earlier wars, where they are exhorting civilians in Gaza not to mention militant deaths, not to mention if one of their loved ones was Hamas, and to keep that as secret as possible. And so when people say in previous conflicts these Hamas lists have been reliable, that's not true either. because there is a clear pattern of Hamas suppressing fighter deaths.
Just to mention, Hamas, with the leader known as the Butcher of Han Yunis, who killed more Palestinians, Yahya Sinwar, yeah? Killed more Palestinians than he ever did Jews. That's the same group that you want to trust their statistics? You can't trust Hamas at all about anything. Hamas is not trustable. One death is it's worth nothing in the eyes of Hamas, in the eyes of us. You can't trust a single number that they say to you.
Throughout their recent conflicts with Israel.
One of the big scandals at the beginning of the war was the Al Ahli hospital, which immediately became a massive social media story, and not just, it actually became a
If
major...
you guys remember the story of this hospital where everybody said that Israel bombed the hospital and killed 500 people, and they had that number instantly, right? If you guys remember, Palestinian media reported instantly 500 deaths, and Israel did an investigation to make sure that it wasn't them, and it actually was a rocket for Palestinian Islamic Jihad funded by the Islamic regime of Iran that fell back, it misfired and fell back onto a hospital. Incendiary rocket, burnt a bunch of people, killed a bunch of people. They mass inflated the casualties and then blamed Israel, and still blame Israel to this day.
Death. And that makes verifying it incredibly challenging. They also mix up the lists. So rather than go from 1 to 50 for list 1 and then continue at 50 to 100 for list 2, they jumble the order of the names each time. They add in columns, take away columns, and it makes comparing the lists side by side extremely difficult. We can say with certainty that thousands of rockets have been fired from Gaza into Israel since the war started, and we know a significant proportion of those drop short. Again, we don't have the exact figures of that in a way that we can verify, but these will have almost certainly caused civilian casualties.
Think, at least on the Israeli side, I've seen percentages as high as 50%. 50% of rockets that are attempted to fire out of the Gaza Strip falling back onto Gazan civilians. There are no bomb shelters in Gaza. There are no sirens in Gaza. When one of those rockets fall, they kill Palestinians. Women, children, men, donkeys, cats, dogs, parrots, everybody, chickens, sheep, whatever you've seen. And those videos that you see on social media of all those horrific casualties and destruction, they don't start when the rocket hits. They start after the rocket hits. They start after the bombing. So you don't even know. You don't get to verify who did this.
We also know that the natural death rate before the war was 514 people in Gaza.
Please pay attention to this. This is the most eye-opening, the most interesting thing, I think, in this entire video, besides one other point that he's going to make.
A month died of natural causes. And that clearly will have
514
a month
of natural causes.
514 before the war. 514 Gazans were dying a day or a month from natural causes. Okay, remember that number.
For a month.
So of old age,
of disease, of illness, and that gives us a total of 6,000 potentially have died since start of the war. And again, we found clear proof of people who died of natural causes being on those lists. So there could be as many as 6,000 people on those fatality lists attributed to the IDF who simply died of natural causes.
Now, if you're Hamas, what is your incentive to not put those names on the list? You are a terrorist group who's trying to draw sympathy from the West and from the international community to get Israel to stop bombing you because you started a war and are holding people hostage. Why would you not put all 6,000? So when we go back to our original number of 42,000, now we've shaved off 20 who are terrorists. Now so we're down to 20 now, right? Let's shave off another 6,000 that may have died from natural causes. You're sitting at 14,000. And there's even more to this, okay? But 14,000 questionable deaths. What if the casualty rate is 10,000? You know, what if the casualty rate is only 10,000? Is it still such a horrific genocide? Will the world ever apologize to Israel? Will the ICU, will the ICC, is it ICC, ICU, ICC? Will the ICC, not the ICU. Will the ICC, will the international community, will the UN, UNRWA, UNIFIL, will anybody apologize to Israel? Will there be any retraction? Will anybody be held accountable? I bet not. Why? Because this isn't about Gazans. It's not about Palestinians. It's not about Muslims dying. It's about Jewish people. It's about anti-Semitism.
It's also worth noting that probably the number of overall people in Gaza has risen since the start of the war.
Right here. The number of people in Gaza since the beginning of the war has risen, has gone up. We have been saying this for a long time now.
We've seen clear reports that there's a birth rate of over 5,000 a month. which puts us somewhere around the 60,000 mark of babies born in Gaza since the start of the war, which is
60,000 babies have been born since the beginning of the war. Literally, even if Hamas numbers were true, of 40,000, even if they were true, there's 20,000 more babies that have been born. 20,000. And you're talking to me about genocide? Even if we look at the number of Palestinians since 1948, all they want to say is that we ethnically cleansed and apartheid and genocided them. 1948, there were 700,000. There's 6 million Palestinians between the river to the sea today. 6 million. There's only 7 million Jews here. There's only 1 million difference. Is this not the most eye-opening information that you need to get?
more than even the number of people that Hamas
I'm gonna play this one more time,
birth rate of over 5,000 a month, which puts us somewhere around the 60,000 mark of babies born in Gaza since the start of the war, which is more than even the number of people that Hamas claim have been killed. So particularly when it comes to genocide, actually, if the number of people in Gaza has increased, that very much is not destroying in whole or in part any kind of group in Gaza whatsoever.
One of the most striking images of this war is, or images are the images of the rubble of Gaza. I mean, clearly it has been flattened.
Listen, guys, this video may be one of the most important, and I really have to say thank you to Visegrad. I don't know how to pronounce it. I know that partially they're based in Israel. They also just did an amazing video in Ramallah. They went to Palestine and tried to interview people and got their perspective on the ground in Palestine. As somebody who's done that myself with a good friend of mine, Corey Gil-Schuster, I can tell you, pretty horrific place to be and pretty apartheidy. Palestinian society needs a serious wake-up check, both in Gaza and in the West Bank. They are causing issues and they are leading to their own destruction. Their own destruction. You can only lie and deceit and try to trick people so much before the truth comes out. Now, unfortunately, this video only sits at 178,000 views. I need the Piers Morgans of the world, the Fox News, the CNN. I need Candace Owens to be reacting and talking to this video. Where are the Ben Shapiros? Where are the Matt Walshes? Where is the Daily Wire? Where is Steven Crowder? Where is anybody reacting to this video? I'm reacting to this video to amplify its message. I hope that this video gets 300,000, 500,000 views and everybody goes watch this video. Please go watch this video. But this is maybe the most important reporting, because if we keep blaming Israel for a genocide, we need proof. If we have a whole country like South Africa who went through actual apartheid, putting an apartheid genocide claim on Israel, we need proof. Here's the damn proof. Here it is. There is no apartheid. There is no genocide happening in Gaza. And here it is on a silver platter for you. Guys, please, one more time, I'll say it again. Go check out this YouTube video. It is called Debunking the Gaza Death Toll. Major Andrew Fox from Visegrad 24. Go show him some love. It will be linked in the description of this video and in the pinned comments. There's no excuse. I don't want to show you guys the whole video. It is only a 17-minute video, and I added, or a 19-minute video, and I added some of my commentary. You have to go support this channel. Show them love for this. Super chat them. Donate to them. Truly, this is the kind of reporting we need, and nobody on the major, in the mainstream media is doing this. Nobody else is covering it the way that they are. So go show them love and support, because it's maybe the most important reporting. I'll see you guys in the next video. I love you long time. Goodbye, Clats. If you believe in my content and want to support me, just know your help is needed. There's a bunch of great ways to monetarily support the channel. Some of the best ways to support me happen to be PayPal, buy me a coffee, or joining our Patreon community. Links to them can be found in the pinned comments or the description of every one of my videos. Joining my Patreon community gives you access to exclusive content and the chance to talk to me on our Discord server. I also go live almost every day here on YouTube. And after my live streams, me and my patrons from Patreon head over to our Discord server to an exclusive after party hangout. Your support is the only way that I can keep creating the content that you love watching for me. Thank you.